actually a place so that is something to God. Whatever our feelings about God are, but this idea that there's something more than us that we don't understand. We hope that God will take care of the people we love and care about the most of them. That's what this blessing is all about. Repeat after me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Dayan with a D. Yes. Ha'emet. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, who rules and judge in truth. Something we also say at the funeral, we say it again later, is something from Job. Job was the epitome of Jewish suffering. And he said, Adonai natan v'Adonai lataf, Shem Adonai Tvorach. God gives, God takes, and through it all we bless the name of God. We never know when our opportunities to love and to be loved and come together are going to run out. So the message here is that we try and enjoy and seize everything we can out of every moment. And from what I learned from you yesterday, I know you did, and I know your mom certainly did. And I hope that that's things that you carry with you today and going forward. So with that, I'd like you now to share your ribbon.
Okay, I have to put down my phone for a second.
Of course. There you go. These difficult times, times we're not having a formal shiva, but some people like to wear the ribbon for the entire week after. So it's your prerogative to do with it what you want. You can keep it after, or you can throw it away. Simple for that first most intense, difficult week of mourning. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ronnie, so it's a beautiful day today. The sky is as blue as you can ever remember. And we are standing next to a tree that I don't know what kind, but it has blossoms on it. And it smells like lily of the valley.
It does kind of look like it too, doesn't it?
Yes. So it is.
We had lilies of the valley on Road.
We did. And I knew it was one of Mummy's favorite flowers. And I can smell it, and it is like blowing right across all of us.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's lovely.
Yeah.
This is the name.
What's it called? American
Basswood or basswood?
basswood. American basswood.
Yeah, because lily of the valley
It's an app where you can take pictures.
Yeah, I know that, but it smells like it.
Oh, good. I love it. I love that fragrance.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So Ronnie, I'll keep you on the line until
She's
it actually goes
streaming.
live. I know you're streaming, but it's not on yet.
The last thing, just before we start,
Right.
can you
You know what I'm
grab
doing,
Kim
Bruce?
and Adam,
You're
and we'll just
going
figure out an order
Sure.
for them, and then we'll start.
with Jeffrey.
Okay, so I'll keep
Adam?
you on hold until.
Hi, Kim. I'm Matthew.
Okay,
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for sending everything. Just give me a heads up. It sounds great. I just wanted to
We're
find
going to
out the
start.
order.
Just say okay.
The order of
Otherwise, I won't turn my
I want to go last.
I want to go last. Yeah.
I have Jeffrey sent me
So, all right. So I'll turn it off.
so I have that on my phone. And then I think you have something from your other brother as well, right? So how do you want to
Are
do
we going to
this?
hang up then?
Well, when do you usually
I'm going to do something at the very beginning to kind of lead into my opening comments. It's nothing specific that you took away from anything that you're going to talk about, and then it's kind of up to you however you want to proceed.
I can start the ball rolling if you want.
Well, should we go like you, me, Jeffrey, and then what about Jamie?
You'll
You'll
do it
do
as part of
Jamie
it.
together.
Let's do
Okay.
that. Adam, Kim,
Jamie, and then
Jeffrey,
then I will. Yes.
Great. Okay.
This is not my speech.
I didn't know. Ready? Are we ready to go?
Yes.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm just going to give my first.
Now, are we going to do speeches before we get the casket
No.
out?
No, that's, yeah, the first thing up is going to be, yeah,
Yeah, we're pallbearers.
well, get ready. Yeah. Okay. That's good. It should be okay when we get up there. It'll be all right. Thank you. So do you. It's been a while, huh? How's everything?
Esaena el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, Ose shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai, Ose shamayim va'aretz. Ha'itein lamod raglecha, ayanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo ishan, shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, yad yeminecha. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, yad yeminecha. Yom HaShemesh lo yakeka ve'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam. Al mekoma tavo v'shalom. Shir LaMa'alot, a song for those who ascend. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, from God, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. You see, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. God will guard your going and coming, now and forever. May our beloved, Gloria, go unto God in peace. Hatzur tamim, Paulo kichol rachab, mishpat el emunah ve'enav, vel tzadik v'yashar hu. Tzadik atar na'lamim l'hachayot, asher biyadcha pigadon kol ruchot, chalil alacha zichronenu limchot, v'yunayinech v'rachimenu v'chuchot, ki lecha Adon rachmi v'aslichot. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevorach, v'hu rachum yechaber avon v'lo yashchit, v'irba lashiva po v'lir kol chamato, v'yashov he'afar al haaretz shehaya, v'aruach tashuv el Elohim asher netana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. May Gloria's soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal, and may God send comfort to those who mourn and grant strength to those whose burden is sorrow. Thank you, everyone, for being here. For those of you who are able to be with us in person, and for those of you who are joining us online, thank you, wherever you are, for joining your hearts together to give comfort and strength to those who mourn. We are here today to say goodbye to Gloria Brown. Chasia bat Baruch Ubreindel, the daughter of Boris and Betty. We are here to honor her and the incredible life she lived, and to show her the ultimate respect we have in Jewish tradition of accompanying her here to her final resting place. Gloria passed away Monday, the 14th day in the Hebrew month of Tammuz. She was 98. She will be lovingly missed by her daughters, Rhonda and Susan, her son-in-law Bruce, 5 grandchildren, Kim, Adam, Jamie, Laura, and Jeffrey, and 8 great-grandchildren, Rory, Sawyer, Georgia, Coco, Samson, Jill, Max, and Jude. Nieces and nephews, cousins, and friends. Gloria was predeceased by her parents, Betty and Boris Remus, by her husband of 57 years, Roy, by her older brothers, Lanny and Bernie, and by her son-in-law, Sheldon. In the book of Ecclesiastes, which is one of the great sources of Jewish wisdom, we read, "The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing." Young or old, those who leave this life never see enough of the world, never cherish their loved ones enough before they are called home. How they yearned for yet another respite from the final summons, and how their loved ones, their family, yearned to have them close to them for yet another challenge in their lives, yet another joy, yet another precious moment together. Also in Ecclesiastes it says, "A good name is to be treasured above precious oil." Jewish tradition is very clear. Wealth, health, even life passes away, but a good name lives forever. And with that in mind, we say today, we know today, Gloria Brown leaves a legacy behind. A rich, full life, 98 years, a loving family of 4 generations, all really from her. A devoted, adoring wife, mother, grandma, and great-grandma. The things she stood for and embodied throughout her nearly 100 years have left a lasting impression and will continue to inform, to inspire, and to shape her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren. She will be remembered for her steadfast loyalty and devotion to Roy, whom she supported, respected, and encouraged to follow his dream of being a doctor wherever it took them, whether it was Gladstone, Manitoba, where he was the only doctor for miles, and where she honed her craft as the consummate hostess and homemaker. Then to Winnipeg, where they made a home on Brock Street and raised their daughters, a home filled with art, music, great food, and the weekly tradition of Friday night dinners in the dining room, always with pie. Then to Rochester, New York, when Roy decided bravely to go back to school and specialize in radiology. She, of course, called him at this time her student prince. Then to Toronto for 25 years. And finally back to Winnipeg, where Gloria cared for Roy as he suffered from Alzheimer's. It all came from that first date when they were fixed up by Roy's sister Sadie, and when Roy didn't quite understand that during the summer The light wreaked havoc on Gloria's hair, prompting him to say after the fact, if she's going to dye her hair, she should try to dye it evenly. Eventually he learned, and they got past that to the wonderful life of nearly 60 years together. There's more, and we'll hear more from grandchildren and from Susan. But Gloria will be remembered for idyllic summers at the cottage at Falcon Lake, for sailing Lake Ontario with Roy on the Glory Bee, for exuding beauty, art, and creativity in everything she did, from the decor of her home, to her sewing, to her cooking and baking, to the pottery she mastered later in life, and to the furniture she designed. She'll be remembered for having the courage herself to go back to school, obtaining a Bachelor's of Fine Arts while she and Roy were living in Toronto, for her commitment to Jewish causes, social justice, her role with the National Council of Jewish Women, her leadership as a president of her local Winnipeg Hadassah chapter, and her trip to Israel in 1959 with Roy, thanks to his involvement and leadership in B'nai B'rith. She'll be remembered for the way she carried herself as a grandma. As her daughters put it to me yesterday, A+++. Developing unique and special relationships with each and every one of her grandchildren, never once deterred by long distance, always making visits to wherever they lived. She was present for all special occasions in their lives, as well as everything in between. She'll be remembered for being a role model as a mother, someone who emphasized education. She herself, in spite of growing up in Winnipeg's North End, the youngest daughter of immigrants during the Depression, was able to go to university where she studied interior design and never forgot the importance of education. But even more than that, is a role model who embraced life always with a can-do attitude, always striving to be her best self. A woman who, whenever challenges arose, worked through them and made the best of them, who believed in herself, who shared her gifts with others, outgoing, chatty, beautiful, intelligent, who never stopped learning, always striving to expand her mind, always interested in what was new, never afraid to try new things. Someone who was truly progressive and ahead of her time, and who lived every day of her 98 years with an inner glow that actually always surrounded her. When we say goodbye to someone we love and say Kaddish at her grave, we affirm our love for someone so near and dear who sadly has physically left us. Our love, however, does not rest on physical survival. It is so much deeper than that. When we love the inner being of the beloved, the quality that makes for uniqueness, the spirit that creates personality and character. That love does not ever disappear. It remains with us as long as we live. With time, we learn to handle the never-ending pain of loss, but that does not erode the affection and emotions we feel for someone who no longer moves about in our midst. We know that whatever lives must someday die. That, however, is true only of the material world, for the spiritual can endure forever. When we lose someone who is dear, we mourn, but we must not mourn excessively. We must be grateful for what we have had and find comfort in our memories. And so it is now my honor to call upon Adam, the first of the grandchildren, to speak as he starts sharing some of his, and they will follow with their memories of Gloria, what she meant to them, and what made her so special. Just be careful with the mic, it kind of drops.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'd like to start off by thanking everyone who's here for coming. Family, friends, and the caretakers. It's very special that you all made the time to come here. I thank you from my family. My earliest memories of Grandma Gloria were at Falcon Lake. She brought a lot of art projects for us to do, whether it was shirts that she had bought that she'd given us markers to draw all over, or doing clay with her. She always had something and always had a sparkle in her eye and always promoted the arts for us. This has become a big part of my life. She took me to my first Broadway musical, not in New York, it was in Toronto, and it was Cats. And it blew my mind. And I said, I have to do something like that. I went from there to theater camp, where Grandma and Grandpa visited to see the shows that I would do. They were extremely supportive of any artistic venture I took. She set an example of somebody in the arts as well. Going back to school and studying the arts, doing pottery, the beautiful drawings that she did. I was always in awe at her abilities, and it let me know that I could do something like that too. What a wonderful example. But it wasn't just the arts that she gave me an example. She gave me the best example in how to have a relationship. Her relationship with Grandpa Roy lasted a long, long time. And there was a lot of love and laughter. And there were sometimes arguments too. But everything would always be resolved with love. And that was the best example. At some points in my life when I was in my teens, I didn't see eye to eye with Grandpa Roy. And that's when Grandma Gloria was the best referee. Grandpa and I would sometimes walk away from each other angry, and I would see Grandpa come back after a while of talking to Grandma Gloria, and he would come and sometimes apologize, but sometimes not, but it would always end with him telling me how much he loved me. And I would see Grandma watching. She was my buddy going to the MTC, which we did for a few years. The plays were sometimes good, sometimes not so good, but the conversation was always the best. She was always honest, and I was always provocative in my questions, but she never hesitated to answer truthfully. It made for a great relationship between the two of us. And after the plays, most often we would head over to Salisbury House, have some soup and a cup of coffee. And great conversation and a great time. Those times were extremely special to me, and I will always cherish them. I watched her struggle with my grandfather's Alzheimer's. I watched her love and her sorrow when he died. I saw the love and the grief. And I realized that grief and sorrow are good things. Because it shows how much you care about someone. And she never held back. Grandma Gloria had a wonderful laugh. Loud, full-bodied. And she would let it go many times. And I'll always remember her laugh. When she got older, and she was slowing down and starting to forget even who I was, I knew I could bring her back by singing old show tunes. Her favorite was Ain't She Sweet? And when she would look at me with a confused look in her eye, not sure if I was a caretaker or a worker in some fashion, I would just sing that to her, and I would see my grandma come back in her eyes and the smile on her face. in the end, she was surrounded by family and caretakers who loved her. Those who couldn't be there were also there too. They were there in love. Pictures of Laura, Jeffrey, Auntie Ronnie, Uncle Sheldon, all of her grandchildren and friends were all around in the condominium. Even knowing that she's gone, I still feel her love is a part of me. A love that will continue every time I hug my family. And for that, I'm eternally thankful.
Hi everybody. I'm going to read something from my brother Jamie, who's in Vancouver, and then I'll read something that I've prepared too. For my dear Grandma Gloria, what a special lady. A strong grandma, not a softie for sure, but a kind and caring grandma without a doubt. She had a way of making us feel loved, even when she was cracking the whip, which she didn't mind doing when required. But whatever it was that was done wrong, you could rest assured that it was Adam's fault. I remember her sense of humor. We often joked and laughed. If I made a wisecrack, she was quick to tell me, "Jamie, not funny." But then she laughed right away with a shake of her head and a sideways glance. Turtleneck sweaters. I seem to remember a lot of those. Was that a thing? She made hot cocoa mugs for all of the grandkids with our names engraved in the clay. I really loved that mug. It gave me a feeling of comfort and made me feel special, just like she did. But not just cocoa mugs, a talented artist and a designer to boot. I'm very lucky to have some of her pottery. So I'm reminded of her and that feeling of comfort and caring whenever I fill the fruit bowl or put flowers in the vase. Such a great grandma, and a great great-grandma too. I love you and will miss you. Wish we could be there with you all, but sending you our love instead, from Jamie, Francis, and Jude. Grandma, I'm going to say many nice things about you, so I hope you're listening. Grandma, I have so many of your things. I was always your girl for hand-me-downs. I wear your shoes and the blouses and skirts you made, always so stylish. I have so many of your things because you were meticulous and took good care, and they lasted well beyond your use of them. I have your pottery and art supplies. I will use them. I have your sewing machine and all your notions and pieces of odd fabrics, folded and sorted. And when I see them, I can sometimes remember the garments you made. I have the letters I wrote you when I was a little girl because you saved them. Your life changed so many times through many decades, and you always knew how to make lemonade from lemons. You came from a time when iceboxes and televisions were the newest technologies, and from a time when a woman's role was to support their husbands and nourish their families. You did that and more. You crossed social boundaries with your curiosity, your creativity, your dexterity, and your calculated approach to things. We always agreed that I got my artistic creativity from you. I have the pottery you made, and I use platters and bowls for family dinner every day. Grandma, you were an important person. You showed us what is possible when you set your mind to it. You excelled at so many things. Sewing, fabric painting, pottery, woodwork, and cooking, just to name a few. I remember staying with you in Toronto and eating breakfast in your kitchen at the table and chairs that you made. Looking out the sliding doors into your backyard, it was full of wonderful fruit trees, apples, plums, and pears. And we'd make jam, and of course your amazing and definitely famous pies, which have spoiled me for crusts forever. Right?
Yes.
You showed us how to bake. Cold butter, a marble slab, don't overwork the dough. One baking lesson, though, she couldn't resist, and she made everything in advance. But who cared when the blueberry pie was so good? Grandma knew about life, about real life, about living with a partner life. When I moved in with Mark, we were both working full-time, and she told me it's very important to hire someone to help with cleaning house, because I wouldn't have time and I might become resentful. She hired us help. When we put in a new kitchen counter, she asked if she could buy us a faucet, which seemed like an odd gift, until we went to the store and found out how expensive they were. And then it was no longer odd, but kind as usual. Grandma, you were always such a trooper. She was up for anything. She and Grandpa liked to travel and explore the world. I have a cloisonné bracelet, her jade earrings, and small brass knives from the Far East. She enjoyed the artistry of fine craft. Grandma, we had a wonderful family trip to Mexico and a fantastic trip to St. Louis, Missouri, where you, Samson, and I visited Cousin Jeffrey and his family. We walked through airports hand in hand, my 6-year-old son on one side of me, and my 88-year-old grandmother on the other side. How lucky was I? It was the best trip. All the young cousins played, and Jeffrey's family showed us the best time. Grandma sat and rested when she needed to, and she always smiled. It's funny what you remember. Grandma always smiled at me, at all the grandchildren. She smiled at Falcon Lake, she smiled on the boat in Toronto, and we all wear our shirts that said the Glory Be Crew. When Grandma and Grandpa moved to Winnipeg, their condo was very elegant and featured beautiful art from their many travels. I say my grandmother was very important because I don't think that she thought she was. She set an example of strength of character and family values that has inspired her friends and family. Grandma, I'm happy your spirit is free from the constraint of your weak and tired body. We cannot thank enough the wonderful women who cared for Grandma. Where are you? There you are. They're Ivy, Jeanette, Amour, Daisy, Odessa, and of course Esther. Thank you for true love and kindness. Grandma, this is the first time in my life and all our lives that we, your family, are without you. And it's terrible that you're not here. I thought you'd like to hear that. Also, I love you, and always I love you forever.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Adam. Your eulogies have both been so personal and so beautiful. Jeffrey, another of the grandchildren, has written a eulogy that he sent me by email, and he asked that I would read it, and I'm honored to do so. So hopefully he can see this as well. In June 2004, on the birth of my first child, I phoned Grandma Gloria to give her the extra special news. "Grandma," I said, "we had a baby boy, and we decided to name him after Grandpa Roy. His name is Rory." "What?" she asked. "You named him Roy?" Seemingly not hearing correctly. "No, Rory. Isn't that great?" "Rory?" "No, Rory. Like Rory." She paused. "Oh, okay. Rory, if that's what you want." Such a grandmother. In December 2006, on the birth of my third child, I phoned Grandma to give her the extra special news. "Grandma," I said, "we just had a baby girl, and we decided to name her after you. Her name is Georgia." I didn't get this in time to read it before, so you have to forgive me. It's good. Her deadpan response, "But I am not dead yet." "Yes, I am aware." Such a grandmother. Yes, indeed, such a grandmother. Being a grandparent also has its privileges, and as it turns out, comes with certain prerogatives too. As was explained when my own mother, who on one occasion had my kids for the day, returned them just as the dinner table was being set, but not before buying each of them a fist-sized chocolate chip cookie. My wife was incredulous. Grandparents' prerogative was the explanation. That prerogative likely is what's prompted my Grandma Gloria to say something about our relationship. I must have been 6 or 7, not more than 10. I was visiting my grandparents in Toronto. I remember coming out of the bath or shower. Grandma Gloria wrapped me in a large towel to keep me warm. She wrapped her arms around me and cuddled me. She then said, "You know, Jeffrey, as your grandma, you can sort of consider me like another mother. Someone who loves you, someone you can talk to." At once I felt the warm embrace of her arms and her words. There are, of course, a number of ways to eulogize a person, to tell stories, to recount accomplishments, to talk about qualities. What I would like to focus on and share with you is how Grandma Gloria made me feel. In a word, Grandma Gloria made me feel loved, and I did my best to love her back. We both felt it. It was mutual, and we told each other so. When I was into my 30s and had returned from the East Coast to live in Minneapolis, I would drive up to Winnipeg on many occasions and stay with her at her apartment. We would hang out, just the two of us. There were many, many visits to Winnipeg, certainly before and after with my parents and my own family. But those one-on-one visits were extra special. They were loving visits. 98 years is a long time, but actually I like to think of it differently. 98 years is a gift, because the long sweep of those years allowed Grandma Gloria to touch and impact so many people. I am only 50. I am done having children and my kids are only teenagers. But I am going to miss calling her up to give her extra special news. That's from Jeffrey. Beautiful words from all of the grandchildren, and Jamie as well, who sent beautiful words. And now I'll call up Susan.
If you'd like, that's fine. So I'm going to preface my eulogy with a part of my life when I was young, growing up at home with my mother and father, and I was definitely the rebellious one. My go-to was my father, not my mother. The bone of contention was usually with my mother. I used to think we were so different, but as time went on, I think we were both very much the same. And so I'm going to read. "20 years ago, when my father was dying, I sat at his bedside. He struggled for every breath. I held his hand, told him I loved him, not to worry, he could go, and promised I would take care of my mother. He took 2 more breaths and he died. What a shock. I thought he was so ready and he could control his living. The other shock came when I realized the promise I had made him and there was no wiggle room. I took that promise seriously, and it became a fresh start to a relationship with my mother and I, which we really have not shared before. We became best friends. What a gift I was given. To know my mother as an independent woman, so artistic in all her endeavors. She said not to talk about her baking, so I won't, but it was so wonderful because of her elegance, sensualness, and those creative hands of hers. There was nothing that she did that did not reflect this. As a little girl, I would sit on the end of her bed in awe as she dressed for a party or a luncheon. She was so beautiful. She wore stockings, white gloves, and a straw hat with a big orange flower that matched her lipstick. She took me to all my festival competitions and bought me a black fox muff to keep my hands warm. Pretend you're at home in the living room with us when you perform, and then you won't be nervous. Yes, she would say, you don't have to be a brownie or continue Hebrew school, but you must continue practicing the piano. Practicing was definitely a bone of contention between us, but it taught me commitment, to have goals. Quitting was not in our vocabulary. When I chose to study design, I had to go to my piano teacher's home and tell her that I would no longer be taking lessons. It was a very, very hard day for me because I adored my teacher. But my mom thought I had to be strong and take responsibility for my actions. Bruce and I traveled several times with my mom and with all my children and grandchildren. We celebrated her 90th birthday in Mexico. She was such a good sport. My mom would turn to me when we were all together and ask if I was responsible for this gathering, and then she would say, I was her treasure. She made me feel like her treasure. She was ever grateful, gracious, appreciative, and she would express this. She always wanted to thank me. I said no need, but if you insist, I'd like a horse. So she bought me a beautiful horse. Something she knew was so important to me. She couldn't believe she had a daughter who rode horses. The love of dogs in my life is because of her. She volunteered walking dogs at the Humane Society. Our first dog was from there. My mom always had dogs, and I can't imagine our home with at least one or two. What does life feel like without my mom? There is a void, but wonderful memories of my life with her keep overwhelming the emptiness. I believe I kept my promise to my father. Her passing was as elegant, dignified, as peaceful as was her life.
Thank you, Susan, for sharing that with all of us. For everyone who has spoken today, such beautiful words of tribute and eulogy for Gloria. In a moment, it is my honor to recite, to chant, and then read in English the El Malei Rachamim prayer, the Jewish memorial prayer, in which we will call Gloria by her Hebrew name, as we mentioned at the beginning of the service. Her Hebrew name was Chasia bat Baruch Ubrindel. Her parents, Boris and Betty, are Baruch and Brindel. And I always find that there's often tremendous wisdom and a teaching in the names that are chosen for us that so often we live up to or grow into. The Hebrew name Chasia is interesting because there are two interpretations of its meaning. One is, may God protect. And I think it's fitting from everything I've learned about how Gloria protected those in her family and the people so close to her. There are others, though, who say that Chasia is a diminutive, that it's derived from the name Chaya, which is Hebrew for life. And as I learned, and as so many people have shared today, and as everyone who knew her knows, she embraced all things life had to offer. Her parents' names, Baruch and Brindle, both mean blessing. Gloria came from blessing. She lived her life blessing others around her. And even though she has left this life, the blessings that she has conferred upon her family and her friends endure, just as her spirit does. El Male Rachamim Shochein Bamromi Amtsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'maot Kedoshim Utehorim Kezohar Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Chasia Bat Baruch Hu Brindle Shehalcha Leolama Began Eidente Menuchata Anabal Harachamim Hastirea Beseiter Kenafecha Leolamim Utzror Bitzror Achaim Enishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach B'shalom Al Mishkava B'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Gloria Brown, Chasia Bat Baruch Hu Brindle, the daughter of Boris and Betty, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that she find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. During these difficult times, these strange times with the pandemic, unfortunately, we can't follow our usual traditions and practices of having a Shiva, where people can go to the mourners, to their home, to comfort them, to share stories. But even though we cannot sanction a Shiva at this time, or even a meal of consolation immediately following this service, I would say for everyone who is tuned in online and watching, for everyone here, please continue to send your messages, your text messages, your phone calls, your emails, your messages of love and warmth and memory and support to help Gloria's family get through this very difficult time. In a moment, we'll conclude our service with the reciting of the Mourner's Kaddish, and then the very powerful and familiar ritual of shoveling dirt into the grave. This is a trademark of Jewish funerals. To shovel dirt into the grave is a mitzvah, a commandment to care for our loved ones until the very end, but also a truly righteous and selfless act, something we do without any hope of reward, something we do solely for someone else, someone who meant so much to so many people. With it, we take on the responsibility of caring for them, even after they have passed. We believe in Jewish tradition that our loved ones deserve to be buried by our own hands, kind, knowing, sorrowful hands, hands that once held their hands. And so I will invite Susan and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, family, and everyone in turn to shovel dirt after we recite the Kaddish. There are different customs depending on where you come from. Everyone seems to pour 3 shovelfuls of dirt. Some people, however, use the front of the shovel. Some people use the back. Some people use it and turn it midway. Some people will return the shovel to the dirt after. Some people will pass it to the next person. I always say, use the custom with which you are familiar, the one that resonates and has meaning for you. That's the whole purpose of ritual after all. There are shovels on both sides, so people can come from both sides. Of course, during these times we ask to make extra special precautions. We have gloves and sanitizer just behind this lady that I'm pointing to over here, if you want to use that. And if the shovel is too heavy, too burdensome, but you still want to participate, there's a pail right here in front of me with a small shovel and sand that works just as well for anyone who may feel daunted by the larger shovels in the larger pile. We try to cover the casket with dirt. We don't worry about filling the entire grave, but if we can, we try and cover the casket with earth before we leave. Just before we do that and before we recite the Mourner's Kaddish, I offer these words to Gloria's family and loved ones. In Hebrew we say, Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch sha'ara ve'lei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May you be comforted and consoled among all those who are in mourning or who have ever been in mourning in our community around the world. With Job we have said, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God you have given, God you have taken, blessed be the name of God. May the memory of Gloria Brown, Chasya bat Baruch Hu Brindle, be a blessing, as we mark that her essence will never leave our hearts and our souls. The Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam ulalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav huya aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates peace and harmony on high bring peace and harmony to us, to all Israel, to all of humanity. And again, let us all say, Amen. Thank you again to everyone who was able to be here for such a sacred and solemn ceremony, and to everyone who has joined us through the beautiful power of technology. We have felt your presence, and on behalf of the family, we're so grateful for all of you tuning in and being with us. I'll invite... Oh, Kim's going to say one more thing.
After the service, my mom and dad are inviting people back to their house to social distance together outside. For those who feel comfortable, there will be a gathering, a healthful gathering for those who wish to come at 324 Hosmer Boulevard.